My name is Marissa Lorne, and on the day the judge granted me custody back, I handed my mother the official restraining order right in front of the courthouse cameras. She blinked like it was a bad dream. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence hum like justice, watching her grasp for control she no longer had. If you've ever felt like your own family punished you for needing love, you're not alone. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Because this one is for anyone who's ever been gaslit by the people who raised them. Now, let me take you back to Eli's fourth birthday, the day it all started. The living room smelled like vanilla frosting and warm wax. I'd lit exactly 4 candles on a tray of store-bought cupcakes because baking had felt too hopeful this year. The balloons were drooping slightly over the fireplace mantel. Every few minutes, Eli ran to the window with that unshakable toddler excitement. "Is Grandma here yet?" His voice was soft, curious, untouched by the ache I was trying to hide. I knelt beside him and brushed a hand over his curls. "Not yet, baby, maybe soon." But the clock kept ticking, and the silence in my phone notifications got louder. At 2:43 p.m. I gave in. I called. It rang twice before my mother picked up. Her voice was brisk. "Yes," I blinked, startled. "Mom, where are you? Eli's been asking for you since." Before I could finish, another voice cut in, my father. Loud, annoyed. "Making drama. We're tired of you always needing something." Something in me snapped, not like a break, more like a quiet crumple. I didn't cry, not then. I just stared out the window at my son's little face pressed against the glass, waiting for people who had chosen not to come. I hung up without a word. "Hey," I whispered, scooping Eli into my arms. "You know what? You deserve more than this, a lot more." He rested his cheek on my shoulder and mumbled, "Can I blow out the candles now?" I nodded, voice tight. "Let's make your wish, sweet boy." I helped him blow out the candles, his little lips puffing with exaggerated focus. He clapped for himself. I clapped too, forcing a smile like it wasn't breaking me inside. I cut the first cupcake in half, setting one side on his Spider-Man plate and one on mine. We sat on the floor, a picnic for two, while the balloons dipped lower and the candles hissed out in little curls of smoke. Illy was fine. Really, he was. Kids don't know what they're missing until someone teaches them to. But me, I sat there pretending not to stare at the door, pretending not to notice how no one had called, no one had texted, no one from my family even asked how Eli was doing, let alone showed up for his birthday. We played with blocks for an hour. I helped him open his presents, just the ones I'd bought, carefully wrapped after bedtime the night before. When he finally crashed from the sugar and excitement, I sat alone in the same room, staring at those little leftover flames inside me. The ones that flickered every time I hoped they'd show up. I thought about calling my brother, but we hadn't spoken in weeks. Months, maybe. Not since the last time he forgot to help when I asked him to watch Eli for a work interview. I thought about texting my mom again. Just to say, what? That her grandson blew out candles alone while she ignored my calls. No. I wouldn't beg, not again. But God, it hurt. And no one ever told me that motherhood would feel this lonely, not because of the kid, but because of the people who vanish when you need them the most. I picked up the cupcake wrappers. I threw away the candles. Then I sat at the kitchen counter, pulled out my phone, and typed one sentence into my notes app. "You'll regret this." I didn't know who I was saying it to, my parents, my brother, the universe, but I meant it. Even if I had to find a way myself. Even if this was the year I stopped hoping they'd love my son. Because I was done waiting at the door. A week had passed since Eli's birthday. The cupcakes had gone stale in the fridge. The balloons, once stubbornly floating, now sagged like they were embarrassed to still be here. I told myself to let it go. I swept the glitter from the floor, packed away the tissue paper, and folded the disappointment into the same drawer where I kept other unspoken hurts. But the silence. That didn't fold. It pressed against my chest every day, whispering a familiar lie. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe they'll call tomorrow. They didn't, not even to ask how Eli was. I went to work, came home, cooked chicken nuggets, colored in dinosaur books, and put on a brave face like every other single mom who doesn't have time to fall apart. Then came Sunday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting coupons I didn't even want to use, just to feel organized. Eli was napping with his blanket clutched to his chest, his little post-birthday ritual. I should have felt peaceful, but my phone pinged. "Mom, send your brother $2,500 for his rest." I read it 3 times, then once more aloud just to believe it. "Send your brother $2,500. For his rest. I sat back in the chair, phone clutched in one hand, mouth slightly open. No greeting. No "how are you?" No mention of Eli's birthday. Just a command like I was a vending machine for undeserving men. My brother Jordan, the same one who didn't bother texting on Eli's birthday, now needed funds for his rest. Was he running a spa now? I opened the message thread, scrolling upward. Nothing but silence. Not even a response to the birthday invite, and now this. The audacity came dressed in full makeup and heels. I could feel my heart speeding up. Not from panic. From rage. The quiet, tidy kind. The kind that simmers in your stomach and makes your hands shake, not from fear but from restraint. I opened my bank app and stared at the account balance. Not because I was considering it, but because I wanted to look it in the face. I had $213.74. The math didn't matter. The principle did. For years, I had made excuses. They mean well. Jordan's just struggling. They don't understand how hard it is to be a single mom. But there was no misunderstanding here. They didn't care. Not about me, not about Eli, not even a little bit. I tapped send money, typed $3. In the memo line I wrote, let him rest on the couch, and hit send. The whoosh of the confirmation felt biblical. I tossed my phone onto the kitchen table and sat there staring at the flickering candle I'd lit out of habit. The same vanilla one I'd burned on Eli's birthday. Wick was struggling now, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to keep going. I gave Jordan the couch, I whispered. That's all he ever gave me when I needed help. I remembered the day I asked him to watch Eli when I had a job interview downtown. I'd offered him gas money, snacks, even access to Netflix. He texted back, busy, try someone else. There was no someone else. I remembered how he laughed when I mentioned going back to school part-time. Girl, you already failed at marriage. Are you trying to prove now? And yet, when he needed bail money last spring, I was the first person Mom called. He's just had a hard life, Marissa, she said. You know how sensitive he is. Sensitive, that was the word they never used for me. I was dramatic, emotional, needy, but Jordan was sensitive. Jordan was tired. Jordan needed rest. I stood and poured myself a glass of water just to do something with my hands, then I picked up my phone again, not to respond, just to look. The message still sat there like a smirking ghost. I could almost hear her voice. This family supports each other, Marissa. Don't make everything about you, but it had never been about me, that was the point. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I set the glass down, pulled out a notepad, wrote one thing at the top in thick black ink, no more asking for what they'll never give. That was the new rule. Because from now on, if my son asked where Grandma was, I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't sugarcoat. Just tell him the truth. They're not coming, baby, but we are. Me and Eli, us too. My phone buzzed again. Mom, was that a joke? Jordan's exhausted. He needs help. I didn't answer. Because I was done explaining myself to people who called my pain dramatic and my generosity obligation. The next morning I dressed Eli in his little blue jacket, stuffed snacks into his backpack, and told myself this wasn't a mistake. I wasn't going over there to start a war, I was going for clarity. I needed to see their faces when I asked why they disappeared on my son's birthday. I needed them to say it out loud, so I could finally stop pretending I didn't already know. The drive to my parents' house was quiet except for the sound of Eli humming to himself in the backseat. He didn't know why we were going. I wasn't sure I did either, until I saw that gray split-level house appear around the corner, the one I once called home. My stomach turned as I pulled into the driveway, gravel crunching beneath the tires like a warning. Eli reached for my hand as we walked up the steps. His grip was firm. He always held tighter when he felt me tense. He was quiet now, no more humming. I knocked once, then opened the door. Old habit. The smell hit me first. My mom's strong vanilla plugins, too sweet and artificial. The kind of scent that pretended everything inside was lovely. The living room looked the same. A plastic-covered couch, muted TV murmuring in the background, framed pictures of Jordan on every shelf. There were exactly 2 pictures of me in the whole house, one from high school graduation and one from my wedding, which was awkwardly cropped now that I was divorced. My mother appeared from the hallway, arms folded. She didn't smile. Really classy, Marissa. $3. I didn't answer her at first. I looked past her, half expecting my father to stay hidden in the kitchen as usual. But no, there he was, seated in his recliner, slowly turning down the volume. You said Jordan needed money for rest, I said. I figured a couch was appropriate, she scoffed. You think that's funny? He's exhausted. He's had a hard year. So has Eli, I snapped. But no one seemed tired enough to show up for his birthday. My voice echoed in the room, louder than I'd planned. Eli clung tighter to my leg, eyes wide. Mom rolled her eyes. We didn't come because you always make things about you. And frankly, we were sick of the guilt trips. Every phone call is you needing something. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was the kind of sound that broke off halfway. I asked you to be there for Eli, one call, one visit, and you ignored us. Dad shifted in his seat. You're always blowing things out of proportion, Marissa. Every little thing becomes a production. Is it a production to want your child to have his grandparents at his birthday party? I turned to him, voice shaking. Or is that only reserved for Jordan's kids? Silence. Because when his daughter sneezed, you showed up with soup, gifts, and a backup humidifier. But my son turns 4 and gets nothing, not even a call. Mom waved a hand dismissively. You're so emotional. Everything is always a slight to you. I knelt and whispered to Eli, can you go sit on the couch for a second, baby? He nodded and shuffled over, eyes still fixed on me like he was afraid I might disappear. He sat down quietly, hands folded in his lap. I stood and faced my parents. You know what I think, I said, quieter now. You've decided I'm the difficult one, the needy one, because that's easier than admitting you play favorites. You support Jordan because it makes you feel important, but when I need help, you call it drama. You act like we owe you something, my father muttered. You don't owe me anything, I said, but you owed Eli a birthday wish. That landed. I saw it, the flicker in my mother's face, the quick shift in her stance. But she recovered too fast, her mouth tightening again. This is exactly what we mean, she said. You barge in here with your accusations, dragging that poor child into adult conversations. I dragged him, I whispered, inching forward. You left him waiting by the window for people who never came. Don't you dare lecture me about what's appropriate. I could feel the tears building now, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. My father leaned back in his chair with a sigh. You should go. It's obvious you came here looking for a fight. I stared at him. The man who used to carry me on his shoulders. The man who used to kiss my scraped knees and call me my girl. He wouldn't even look at me now. I turned back toward Eli and held out my hand. Come on, sweetheart, we're done here. He slipped off the couch without a word and took my hand like it was the only thing keeping him anchored. We walked toward the door. My mother called after us. You know, your attitude is why Jordan doesn't talk to you. I turned just once and said, Number Jordan doesn't talk to me because I stopped pretending he was a victim. And then I walked out with my son beside me, not because I got the answers I came for, but because I finally understood I was never going to get them. The screen door creaked behind us as I stepped out onto the porch with Eli's small hand still wrapped in mine. My breath hitched with the cold afternoon air, crisp and biting, but not as sharp as the ache twisting inside me. We stood there in silence for a moment, just me and my son. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the sound of my mother's voice still ranting from inside. Eli looked up at me. Mommy, are we in trouble? I crouched to meet his eyes. No, baby, we're not in trouble, we're just finished with people who don't treat us right. He nodded, like that made perfect sense, and then turned his attention to a brown leaf skittering across the porch. I was so focused on keeping my voice steady for him that I didn't hear the other door open. Marissa, the voice came from the side steps, gentler, uncertain. I turned and saw her. Danielle, my cousin. She looked the same but not. Her dark curls pulled back, hoodie sleeves pushed up, holding a mason jar of tea like she was just passing through time instead of a family implosion. She was my mom's sister's daughter, 6 months older than me and someone I hadn't really spoken to in over a year. Danielle, I said, caught off guard. What are you? I was upstairs, she said quietly, walking down toward me. Visiting Aunt Marla, heard everything. I blinked. You were here that whole time. She nodded and gave a rueful little smile. Yeah, was trying to slip out unnoticed, but I couldn't leave after that. There was a pause between us, not awkward but weighted. She took another step closer. I just need you to know something, she said. You're not crazy. I looked at her, really looked at her, and the words hit me harder than they should have. They've done this for years, she continued. To you, to anyone who doesn't play along. That thing your mom said about making everything about you. That's her go-to when someone asks for basic decency. I swallowed hard, heat rising behind my eyes again, but it wasn't shame this time, it was recognition. They do the same to Aunt Lydia, she added. And don't even get me started on how they treated your mom's old friend Joan when she got sick. I stopped coming around because I got tired of pretending it wasn't toxic. She looked at Eli. I saw the balloons through the window last week. I knew it was his birthday. I didn't come by because. Honestly, I thought your parents had something planned. But when I asked Aunt Marla today if they'd done anything, she just looked at me like I'd brought up a scandal. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. So they lied to everyone. Danielle nodded. They always do. If it doesn't make them look good, it never happened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped beside me and sat down on the porch swing, gesturing for me to sit too. I hesitated, then joined her, keeping Eli close on my lap. You know, she said after a moment, I think we both spent a lot of years trying to earn love from people who only give it conditionally. I stared ahead at the quiet street. The trees were bare, the world looked still. I think I just kept hoping, I said, that if I was patient enough or kind enough or good enough, they'd change, for Eli at least. Danielle shook her head gently. They don't change, they just get more comfortable making you feel like the problem. Her words weren't new. But today they landed different, because today I was done. I'm not trying anymore, I said, almost to myself. Not for them, not even for the illusion of family. Eli deserves more than people who make him invisible. Danielle looked at me with something that felt like quiet pride. Then let them go, I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I already have. A breeze rustled through the porch columns, and Eli snuggled deeper into my coat. Danielle leaned forward and set her mason jar on the railing. Listen, you ever need backup. Even if it's just someone to remind you you're not imagining things, I'm here, okay? I met her eyes. And for the first time in what felt like weeks, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. Thank you, I whispered. Seriously, she smiled. We survivors have to stick together. I stood and gently lifted Eli into my arms. He wrapped himself around me like he'd done since he was a baby, like he still believed I could protect him from anything. And maybe I finally could. As we stepped off the porch, Danielle called after me. Hey, she said, one more thing, next year, let's throw Eli the birthday party he deserves. At my place, balloons, cake, the works. I turned back and grinned through a shimmer of tears. You're on. Then I walked down the steps, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Not because they'd apologized, but because I finally stopped waiting for them to. The next morning, I left my phone on silent and let the sun wake us. Eli padded into my room with bedhead and sleepy eyes, dragging his blanket behind him like a little lion's tail. He crawled into bed beside me and tucked himself into the crook of my arm like it was the only place that made sense. For a while, we just laid there, breathing together. No rush. No noise. No one needing anything from me but love. By 10:30, we were strolling down the city park path, the autumn leaves crunching under our shoes in shades of amber and rust. I'd packed him a snack, and he was carrying it in his dinosaur lunchbox like it was a treasure chest. Every so often, he'd stop to show me a rock or a stick or something he believed was important, and every time I bent down, nodded like he'd made a discovery and said, "Wow, baby, that's a good one." The air was cool but not cold, with just enough wind to make the pond shimmer in ripples. We stopped at the edge of the water where the ducks were gathered, bobbing and preening and arguing in their quacky little voices. Eli squealed. Look, that one has a green head. Mallard, I said softly, remembering from a childhood book. See the white band around its neck, that means it's a boy duck. He watched in awe, completely captivated. I sat down on the bench behind him, letting him lean against my knees as I ran my fingers gently through his curls. For a moment, I just watched him. I tried to let the stillness stretch longer than the thoughts in my head, but they always catch up eventually. The house, the porch, my mother's voice, my father's indifference, Jordan's silence, even the sting of that $2,500 text, it all sat there just below the surface like a bruise I'd stopped noticing until I bumped it again. I reached into my bag and pulled out a juice box, handing it to Eli. He took it with a grin. Thanks, Mommy, I smiled back. Hey, buddy. Yeah. I looked at him, really looked. His little face so full of trust, his eyes bright and untouched by bitterness for now. You know how sometimes people let us down? He frowned a little, still focused on the ducks. Like when they don't come to birthdays, I exhaled. Yeah, like that. He was quiet for a moment, sipping through the straw. Maybe they were busy, he offered, trying to be kind. Maybe, I whispered, but you know what? What? I leaned down and kissed the side of his head. You and me were the only team that matters now. He turned around and grinned, cheeks flushed. Like superheroes. Exactly like superheroes, I said, the unstoppable team of Eli and Mommy. Do we have powers? He asked, wide-eyed. I laughed. We have the best power of all. What? Each other. He seemed satisfied with that answer and returned his attention to the ducks, happily tossing a cracker into the water. I leaned back on the bench and let the breeze hit my face. For the first time in days, my chest didn't feel like it was being pulled in 10 directions. I wasn't okay. Not completely, but I wasn't broken either. The storm behind me was still brewing. I could feel it in the way my phone buzzed unanswered in my purse. I knew there'd be fallout. The guilt texts, the family group chat silence, the carefully edited versions of what had happened. But today, none of that followed us here. There was peace in this little moment. In the ducks. In Eli's laughter. In the distance I'd put between our lives and the people who didn't know how to care for them. When we left the park an hour later, Eli holding my pinky like it was a magic rope, I didn't look back. Because the old version of me, the one who begged for scraps of love, was still sitting on that porch. And I wasn't going back to get her. The morning started gently. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in soft gold stripes across our living room floor. Eli was still asleep, curled up in a tangle of dinosaur sheets, and I sat at the table sipping coffee with a quiet sense of resolve. Not peace. Peace still felt like a luxury, but clarity. Yesterday had given me a glimpse of the life I wanted. Just me and my son, choosing joy in small places. I was still hurting, sure, but I wasn't reaching backward anymore. I'd even started a grocery list. I had plans to take Eli to the library after lunch. I was going to cook something real for dinner. It felt good, until the knock. It was sharp, firm, official, not a friendly knock, not the mail, not a neighbor. The sound of it made my body stiffen instantly. I crossed the living room slowly, heart picking up pace, coffee forgotten on the table. I opened the door and everything changed. Two uniformed officers stood on the porch. A man and a woman. The man held a clipboard and a folded document. The woman's eyes went straight to mine, calm but unblinking. "Marissa Lorne?" the man asked. "Yes," I said slowly, stepping forward. "Is something wrong?" The woman took a half step closer. "We're here to serve a temporary removal order." "A what?" my voice cracked. "There's been a report filed," the man said, unfolding the paper, "alleging child endangerment in this residence. Based on the information received, the Department of Children and Family Services has approved a temporary removal of your son while the situation is assessed." I blinked. "Wait, what? No, that has to be a mistake." My heart was pounding now. The words barely made sense. Child endangerment. "I'm sorry," the woman said, more softly, "but we're required to escort your son to a temporary guardian or placement today. You'll be given a caseworker and instructions on how to respond legally." "No," I said, stepping backward, hand on my chest. "You don't understand. There's no danger here. Eli's safe, he's loved, this isn't happening." "I understand how upsetting this is," the man said, almost mechanically, "but we have a valid warrant. Do you have a relative or neighbor who can stay with you? The child cannot remain in the home at this time." "You want to take him right now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "From his bed? We'll try to make it as calm as possible." As calm as possible, I felt like I'd left my body. My fingers went numb. The porch, the sky, the sound of birds, it all blurred into a haze of static. Behind me I heard tiny footsteps on the hardwood floor. "Mommy," Eli's sleepy voice called. I turned fast. "Stay back, baby." But he was already there, rubbing his eyes, holding his stuffed stegosaurus. "Are we going to the library?" The woman officer crouched down slowly. "Hi, Eli, my name is Officer Morgan. We just need to take a little ride today, okay? Mommy will meet you soon." His brow furrowed. "I don't want to ride, I want Mommy." I dropped to my knees and grabbed him, holding him so tightly he squeaked. "It's okay," I whispered, breath ragged. "I'm right here, you're okay. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't your fault, you hear me?" He nodded, confused and afraid. But they were moving now. The man gently touched my shoulder. "We have to go." "No," I said, shaking. "Please, there has to be another way. Let me talk to someone. You can look around. You can talk to our neighbors. He's safe here. You're making a mistake." "I'm sorry, ma'am." They eased him out of my arms. He cried out loud and sudden. "Mommy, no, Mommy." My hands reached for him, but the woman officer blocked me gently, her voice firm but soft. "I promise he'll be okay." Eli sobbed, arms outstretched toward me, terrified. I stood frozen on the porch, watching them walk him down the steps and into the car. He was screaming now, my name, again and again. The door shut. The engine started, they drove away, and I just stood there on the porch. Alone, the sky was still blue. The wind still blew gently through the trees. A bird chirped from the gutter. Nothing matched what had just happened. I slowly stepped back inside and shut the door. Then I crumpled to the floor and screamed into my hands, because someone had taken my son. And I didn't even know who, or why. The walls of the interrogation room were the color of wet cement, cold, unmoving, indifferent. The flickering light overhead buzzed with a rhythm that scraped at my nerves. I sat in the metal chair with my palms flat against the table, trying to keep my breathing even. But my hands trembled anyway. No one had offered me coffee. No one had told me where Eli was. The door opened with a low squeal, and in walked a tall, broad-shouldered man in a slate-gray suit. His badge glinted as he moved, Detective Granger. Late 40s, neatly combed hair, no-nonsense face. He closed the door behind him and took a seat across from me. He didn't say hello. "Marissa Lorne," I nodded. "Yes." He opened a folder and tapped a few keys on the laptop beside him. "You've been made aware of the child endangerment report filed against you." "No," I said quickly. "Not really. The officers just showed up and said they had to take my son. No one told me who made the report or what it said." "Please, what's happening?" He turned the screen so it faced me. A paused video, my parents' living room, my voice mid-sentence caught in a frame, mouth wide, hand pointed. He clicked play. "You all ignored Eli's birthday, not one call, not one text." My voice blasted from the speakers. The camera was angled from behind a vase, clearly recorded without my knowledge. Then my father's voice. "You always make everything about you." My face twisted in pain. Eli clung to my leg, silent. Granger paused the clip and looked at me. "This was submitted anonymously," he said, "along with an official complaint citing emotional volatility, possible psychological distress, and concern for your child's well-being." I blinked at the screen. My mouth moved but no words came out. That was an argument," I finally managed. "That was me standing up for my son." He raised an eyebrow. "That tone, that volume. With a child in the room." "He wasn't scared," I said. "He knows I was defending him. He was ignored, dismissed, forgotten. I was angry, yes, but I have never hurt my son." Detective Granger's expression didn't change. "You seem unstable," he said bluntly. "In that video, at least." I felt the words hit me like cold water to the face. "Because I raised my voice?" I asked, barely holding back tears. "Because I didn't stay calm while being gaslit by the same people who ignored their grandson's birthday." He closed the folder. "I'm not here to debate family drama. I'm here to determine whether a child is at risk." I stared at him, heart pounding. "And is he?" I whispered. "Do you really think he is?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, gathered the folder, and moved toward the door. "Someone will be in shortly with paperwork. You'll be assigned a caseworker within 48 hours. In the meantime, I suggest getting legal representation." He opened the door but paused before leaving. "For what it's worth," he added, "I've seen worse, but this won't be decided on feelings, only evidence." The door clicked shut. I sat alone again. Colder this time, the clip still playing in my head on a cruel loop, my voice raised, my child watching. They were trying to twist love into violence, grief into danger, and I had no idea how to fight back. The house was too quiet. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting, half hoping, to hear the scrape of little socks against the floor, the clatter of toys, Eli's voice calling from down the hall. But there was nothing, just silence. The kind that clings to the air and makes every step feel too loud. I dropped my keys on the counter. They made a hollow sound on the wood. My purse slid from my shoulder to the floor, forgot. And then I just stood there, frozen in the middle of my own living room. His toys were still scattered across the rug. The blanket he loved to drag around was bunched on the couch. His favorite yellow cup was on the table, half full of watered-down juice. I sank down where he usually sat, the cushion still holding the faintest shape of his body. My hand reached out, instinctively, toward the spot he always curled into. It was still warm, or maybe that was just my imagination playing tricks. Then the tears came. But they weren't loud, sobbing tears like at the door. They were quiet, heavier, like gravity had finally decided to double down on me. I curled into myself, arms wrapped tight around my chest, and whispered, "They set me up." Because it was the only thing that made sense. The video, the timing, the way the officers hadn't hesitated, the way the footage had captured exactly the worst-looking angle. It wasn't random. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was planned. I could see it now. My mother's cold silence, my father's dismissiveness, Jordan's convenient absence. They'd seen that argument coming and decided to make it mean something more. They'd used my grief as evidence. They'd used my voice, my rage for my son as ammunition. And now they had him. I stood up abruptly, the motion dizzying. I paced the room, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. I couldn't scream. I couldn't break anything. I couldn't even cry the way I wanted to because no one was here to hear it. No one would come running to ask, "Are you okay?" Because they had taken the only person who ever did. I stopped in front of the window. The city lights shimmered outside, casting a faint glow on the floor. Somewhere out there my son was sleeping in a stranger's bed, without his dinosaur blanket, without his bedtime story, without me, my fists clenched. "They want to break me," I whispered through my teeth. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." I walked to the fridge and ripped off the family photo held up by a magnet. Eli's third birthday party, my mother's smile fake, my father's arm awkwardly stiff around me, Jordan not even present. I crumpled it, tossed it, then I grabbed a pen and paper. Not to beg, not to plead, to plan. I didn't know how yet, I didn't know what tools I had. But this wouldn't stand. I wasn't going to be the girl who curled up and disappeared. I was going to be the woman who made them regret ever underestimating me. I hadn't touched a single thing. Eli's toys were still where he left them. His coloring book was still flipped open to the page with half a blue T-Rex. I hadn't even wiped down the juice stain on the counter, because somehow, cleaning it felt like erasing him. I couldn't sleep the night before. Every creak of the house made me sit up, convinced it was a car pulling into the driveway. Knock didn't come again, at least not until tonight. When it did, I didn't flinch. I opened the door slowly, heart steady, eyes dry. Detective Granger stood there, backlit by the porch light. His expression was unreadable but less guarded than before. "Miss Lorne," he said with a short nod, "I'd like to conduct a follow-up inspection." I stepped aside without a word and let him in. He moved through the space like someone walking through a museum, quiet, deliberate. He didn't speak at first. Just looked, studied, took notes on a small pad. I let him see everything. I wanted him to. He paused in the living room, eyes landing on the small chalkboard on the wall, Eli's home zone. A few scribbled notes from me. Tuesday, library Thursday, bath night words of the week. Share, gentle, roar. I saw his eyes scan the list before he glanced at the tiny pair of sneakers lined up neatly by the door. He moved to the kitchen next, looking at the dishes drying in the rack, the meal calendar I'd pinned to the fridge months ago. He took his time, but not in a cruel way, like someone trying to read between the lines, not just the headlines. I followed him silently, arms folded. When we reached Eli's room, he lingered a little longer. The blanket, the stuffed animals, the bookshelf sorted by color. His gaze paused on a framed photo of me and Eli at the zoo, Eli's face painted like a tiger, his mouth mid-roar. Granger looked at the photo, then at me. "I spoke to your neighbors today," he said quietly. I waited. He turned and stepped back into the hallway, letting the silence breathe before he continued. "They said your son laughs a lot, that they hear him singing through the windows. They said you read to him on the porch in the evenings, that he's always dressed warm in winter, that he waves at their dogs." Something in my chest cracked, but in a good way, a small break to let in light. "They said," he added, "you're a good mother." I exhaled, the sound sharp in the still air, my throat tightened. "And what do you think?" He studied me. "I think," he said slowly, "you're a woman who was pushed too far in a house where no one listened. I think you raised your voice, but I haven't seen one sign of a child in danger." My eyes searched his. "Then why was he taken?" His jaw tightened. "Because systems don't run on instinct. They run on paperwork, on footage, on fear of being wrong." He took a final glance around the living room, then closed his notebook. "I'll be submitting my follow-up tonight. It won't fix everything, but it's a start." I walked him to the door, every step feeling lighter than the one before. Just before stepping outside, he turned to face me again. "Miss Lorne," he said, voice lower, "I see a lot of homes, a lot of real harm. This isn't one of them." My voice was barely above a whisper. "Then maybe there's still some truth left in this world." He didn't smile, but something in his face softened. As he walked down the steps, I stood in the doorway a moment longer, hands gripping the frame. This wasn't over, I knew that. But for the first time since the knock that shattered my world, something inside me felt steady, because someone had looked inside our lives. And finally, they'd seen us. The courtroom felt colder than I imagined it would. Not in temperature, but in energy. Like hope wasn't allowed to speak until summoned. I sat alone at the long wooden table, hands clenched in my lap. The walls were beige, the chairs too stiff, and the clock on the wall ticked in a slow, cruel rhythm. The judge sat high above, a woman with sharp eyes and an unreadable expression. My heart hadn't stopped pounding since sunrise. Across from me sat a caseworker I'd never met before. No family, no friends. Just an empty seat where anyone should have been for moral support. Except for him. Detective Granger stepped up to the witness stand in a crisp gray suit. His voice was calm, measured, but steady with conviction. I conducted 2 in-home evaluations of Ms. Lorne's residence, he began. The environment was safe, structured, and child-friendly. The child's room was clean, organized, and clearly lived in. There was no indication of neglect, abuse, or endangerment. The judge nodded slightly, taking notes. Granger continued. In addition, I interviewed 4 neighbors independently. All gave unsolicited positive accounts of the child's welfare. They described Ms. Lorne as engaged, attentive, and nurturing. They had no concerns. I closed my eyes for a moment. He didn't have to say any of that. He could have phoned it in, said just enough to satisfy protocol. But he went further. He chose to. The judge turned her gaze toward me. Ms. Lorne, do you have anything you wish to say before I rule? I rose on shaking legs. I just want my son back, I said, barely managing to speak past the lump in my throat. He's my entire world. I've never hurt him. I would never. I just want to bring him home. The judge was quiet. Then she looked down, shuffled some papers, and spoke. Custody is hereby restored to Marissa Lorne, effective immediately. There is no legal basis to prolong the separation. Furthermore, given the questionable origin of the complaint, this court is ordering a formal defamation investigation to determine whether false or malicious intent was involved. The words struck me like a physical force. Restored, immediately. A small cry escaped my throat, relief, disbelief, everything at once. The courtroom door opened behind me, and I turned to see Eli being led in by the caseworker, clutching his dinosaur blanket and blinking in confusion. "Mommy," he called softly. I rushed to him, arms out, catching him mid-run as he flew into me. Tears streaked down my cheeks as I held him, burying my face into his neck. "I'm here, baby," I whispered. "I'm here, I've got you." He clung to me like he'd never let go again, and I wouldn't let him. Not ever. As I pulled back, still holding Eli close, I glanced over my shoulder at Granger. He stood off to the side, preparing to leave. I crossed to him slowly, heart still pounding. "Thank you," I whispered, emotion choking the words. "For seeing me when no one else would." He hesitated, then nodded once. "I'm just doing my job," he said, eyes steady. But something in his voice cracked ever so slightly, just enough to let the truth peek through. They didn't look surprised to see me. My mother sat rigid in the courtroom, hands folded neatly in her lap, jaw locked so tight I thought she might grind her teeth down to dust. My father leaned back in his chair, smug, arms crossed like this whole thing was beneath him. But I could see it in their eyes, the flicker of worry, the kind that only shows up when control begins to slip. I sat just a few rows behind the prosecutor's table, Eli's small hand in mine. He had headphones on, a tablet playing soft cartoons in his lap. Too young to understand what was happening. Too young to see the people who had tried to break his mother now sitting in front of a judge. But I saw. I remembered every ignored call, every lie. Every time they'd twisted my pain into a weapon. And now they were the ones under the microscope. The courtroom quieted as the prosecutor stood and adjusted her blazer. "Your Honor," she began, her voice sharp and clear, "we present digital evidence submitted during the course of the defamation investigation, including surveillance footage taken from inside the residence of the defendants, without the knowledge or consent of the plaintiff, as well as coordinated messages that encouraged false testimony and the filing of a fraudulent child endangerment report." I didn't breathe. My mother's face went pale. The prosecutor continued. "In addition, we have phone records and messages between Mr. and Mrs. Darrow," she gestured toward my parents, "and a third party known to have submitted the video footage to authorities. The correspondence makes it explicitly clear that their intent was retaliation, not protection." The judge raised an eyebrow, reviewing the documents handed over by the clerk. My father shifted. My mother's nails dug into her purse strap. I sat taller. Let them squirm. Let them feel even a fraction of what they put me through. The hearing wasn't long. This wasn't a criminal trial, at least, not yet, but it was enough for the court to take action, enough for the truth to finally find air. The judge's voice rang out like a gavel long overdue. Given the weight of the evidence, this court is issuing a formal no-contact order. Marissa Lorne is to remain the sole guardian of her child, and the defendants are prohibited from contacting her or her son, directly or indirectly, for a minimum of 3 years. No reaction, just the hollow silence of people who never expected to lose. But the real moment happened after. Outside the courthouse, under a sky washed clean by winter light, I stood near the steps with Eli's hand wrapped tightly in mine. We watched the cars roll by, his breath forming clouds in the cold. That's when I saw them, my parents. They came striding out of the building like they still owned the world. My mother's heels clicked angrily against the concrete. My father trailed just behind, and then Granger. He was standing just a few paces away, speaking with the prosecutor quietly when my parents made a beeline toward him. My mother hissed low, venomously, "You think this is over, you'll regret siding with her. We'll record everything. We'll make sure people see what kind of man you are." Granger turned to her slowly. Calm, steady, not flinching. "You've already written your sentence," he said. Then he turned his back to them and walked away. I stood there watching, not saying a word, and for the first time in my life I wasn't the one chasing them. I wasn't begging to be heard. I wasn't holding my breath, hoping they'd change. I was just holding my son's hand, while they walked away empty. The courthouse looked different this time. The gray walls didn't feel as cold. The stairs didn't feel so heavy beneath my feet. Maybe it was the fresh air, or maybe it was the way Granger was standing at the bottom of the steps, his coat unbuttoned, one hand in his pocket, the other holding 2 paper cups. "Hey," he said when I reached him. "Coffee?" I smiled, surprised. "What's the catch?" "No catch." He handed me a cup, then hesitated. "Okay, maybe a small one." I raised an eyebrow. "I was thinking," he said, "this wasn't exactly the way I imagined meeting you. Surveillance footage, custody hearings, not the most romantic setting." I let out a laugh, soft, surprised, but real. He looked down for a second, then back at me. "Maybe we could try again, less courtroom, more coffee." I stared at him for a moment, the wind brushing a strand of hair across my cheek. "You didn't have to care," I said. "You could have just done your job and walked away." He shook his head. "Eli matters, and so do you." I glanced down at the warm cup in my hands, heart fluttering in that gentle way it hadn't in a long time. "After everything you did for my son," I said, lifting my eyes to meet his, "I'd be honored." He smiled just a little, and we walked down the courthouse steps together, side by side, the winter air a little less sharp, the future just a little closer. The sky was a soft blue that morning, clear, open, kind. Eli's laughter rang through the park as I gave the swing one more push, his little legs kicking the air like he was trying to fly. His hair had grown longer, and he'd insisted on styling it himself that morning, which meant it pointed in 5 different directions. He looked so free, and I did too. Granger walked toward us with 2 dripping cones, one chocolate, one strawberry, grinning as he handed the pink one to Eli. "Extra sprinkles," he said. "Just how the superhero likes it." Eli squealed and hopped off the swing without hesitation. "You're the best." He ran to the bench and plopped down to devour it, cheeks already sticky. I took the chocolate one and raised it toward Granger. "You remembered." He shrugged, smiling. "You only reminded me 400 times." We sat beside Eli, the sun warm on our faces, the world moving gently around us. Kids played, dogs barked, someone strummed a guitar in the distance. It was all so normal. And after everything, that felt like the greatest miracle. I looked around at the other families, their easy laughter, their peaceful rhythm, and for the first time I didn't envy them. I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in, because we had built something of our own, stronger, truer. I glanced over at Granger, his hand resting on Eli's back protectively, and I thought, it's not blood that makes a family, it's who stays when everything falls apart. Justice gave me back my son. But love. Love gave me peace. That was the end of my story. I still think about Danielle stepping onto that porch and choosing to speak up when she could have stayed silent, when family silence is usually the rule. What would have happened if she hadn't said anything? Did she do the right thing? If you've ever been in a moment like that, where telling the truth meant breaking loyalty, tell me in the comments what you chose to do. And if my story moved you even a little, don't forget to like and subscribe. I've got more to share.